If the desire currently feels like longing, if the desire currently feels like there's something outside of me, or it feels like it's coming from wanting or grasping or scarcity, where we can actually meet it with the foundation required to hold what it is that we say that we want. It comes up in money as well, wanting more financial abundance, wanting more freedom and choice in that regard, but then avoiding the actions that actually create that and build that for yourself. Meaning you can only go up and out as far as your roots have gone down and in. So finding that middle ground is the foundation of security and the foundation of creation, what actually brings us into alignment. Welcome back. So before we begin today's episode, if you are sick of attracting the same repeating relationship dynamics and you are ready to create deeper security, more fulfillment, and more aligned intimacy in your relationships, you can visit the links in the show notes to get started or explore our signature relationship transformation program, Alchemy of Connection. So today I want to talk all about why you are not aligning with what you say that you want in life. I'm going to go into it from an energetic, somatic, and really tangible perspective that you can actually understand rather than woo-woo language. And that's what we always are trying to do here. Give you language and practices and ways to understand the things that feel a little bit obscure or you don't actually know how to implement them in your everyday life. So when we talk about alignment, oftentimes we can think, well, I know what I want, and so why is it not here? I have the fantasy, or I have the longing, or I have the desire, and shouldn't I then just naturally move towards it? However, why is it that the years pass? And on some level, I've known I've wanted this thing, and I still don't seem to be in a place of alignment where I'm actually attracting it. So we're more complex than that. The paradox of it being more complex and also quite simplistic. So what you really need to understand as the premise of this whole conversation is that we are always finding or looking for this balance between expansion and contraction. You think about the breath and the way the breath works of expanding the lungs and then contracting the lungs, or this relationship between yin and yang. So the active and the sun rising, and then the more passive and the moon rising and the sun descending. So there's that yang fire and that yin cooling water energy. So we're always looking at this relationship between expansion and contraction, or more freedom or more desire versus more stability and more security. So it's really important to understand this when we're talking about coming into alignment, because we both need to have a relationship with what the desire is, but it be integrated and understood in a way that we're also finding the stability and the security within that. And what that means is you receive it when you have that foundation of stability and security that can hold it. So if the desire currently feels like longing, if the desire currently feels like there's something outside of me, or it feels like it's coming from wanting or grasping or scarcity, it just means we don't have that harmonious relationship between the desire and the stability yet, where we can actually meet it with the foundation required to hold what it is that we say that we want. So we can have all of this big desire for freedom and expansion and exploration without actually having the tools or the stability or the foundation to actually hold any of that in a way that truly nourishes us. Which is why we see in our society so many big ups and downs, big fractures between men and women. We're at a very pivotal point in the collective around this now. So the masculine and the feminine, the polarity of right versus left, this really big split. And you're seeing it also in people's relationships between their head and their heart, the really chaotic emotions, the relationship within their own nervous system, that we're going from like really big outward expression that's quite egoic or searching for or seeking validation into numbing and collapsing and withdrawing. And what we're seeking to find, if we're coming into alignment and we're attracting from that place of receptivity with alignment at that frequency, is that we are finding more of a balance and more of a harmony between these really extreme poles, or this kind of really erratic, unbalanced inner and outer experience. So you might have had the experience of wanting something so deeply, but simultaneously resisting things that maybe feel like it, or feeling like your walls come up around certain things, or feeling confused by your own push-pull behavior, or getting close to something you desire and then pulling away, ruminating a lot, feeling dysregulated, feeling inside of an inner conflict with it, feeling frustrated because your actions aren't matching your intentions, and also feeling like different parts of you are voting for wildly different outcomes and options. And that's a really big sign that we have these kind of fractures within us, and we're not in alignment, because there's this swing between wanting this thing and wanting this other thing, like expansion and stability, or freedom and security, and those things don't currently feel like they meet or make sense in a harmonious way. So common examples of this might be wanting partnership or wanting relationship and craving closeness, and then feeling like you flip into wanting distance. I think most people have been on the receiving end of some sort of variation of this, in terms of somebody being quite intense up front, or the love bombing, and then it turning into a withdrawal or a ghosting of some sort. This is the extremes and the unbalanced nature of their own internal landscape. Other examples might be in business, where you're really craving visibility. You're wanting impact. You're wanting to be seen, or this might be in any expression of your own, not just business, but then you avoid being seen, or you judge people in their version of visibility, and you feel that resistance around the expression of the truth of you. It comes up in money as well, wanting abundance, more financial abundance, wanting more freedom and choice in that regard, but then avoiding the actions that actually create that and build that for yourself. So yes, the conversation is about clarity, but if a woman is willing to get vulnerable enough, she's genuinely got a connection to what it is that she desires. Maybe it's not, super specific, and we always have to work on that in terms of clarity of what we are putting out there, of our intention and what we want. But in terms of like the general understanding, everyone is generally seeking these same kinds of things. So secure relationships, deeper intimacy, more inner peace, more financial abundance, more purpose, alignment, and success in our career. So the issue then becomes more about this internal relationship we have with how this desire actually moves us, and how we experience it in our system, and how deeply and truthfully we believe that we can actually create the foundation or the circumstances or the environment in which to make that a reality. And when we don't believe that is possible, then the physical things never fall into place, the actions don't fall into place, and that desire remains this yearning, it remains this longing that is never met by the tools, the actions, the circumstances, the foundations that we need to make it so. So you want to think about expansion like growth, possibility, freedom, desire, exploration, more expression, more aliveness, more creativity, the upward and outward expressive things. So that's what I would consider more of the yang or yang energy of that upward and outward movement and that expansion, met by the contraction energies, which are more about security, stability, the descent, slowing down, more predictability, more rest, more grounding, more stability, more energy conservation rather than energy expenditure. So a really important point is in that modern self-development and modern ways are often glorifying the expansion and the yang and the upward and outward energy. And this isn't wrong. This is collectively the energy that we have been inside of. We have been inside of a collective masculine phase, and everything is cyclical. And so we're very focused on that being a negative thing and demonizing that process, whereas it is just as it is on a collective and cyclical level. So on a collective level, we have been inside of that more yang, more upward and outward energy, which is just something to learn from, embrace, understand. But if we get caught too much in that process, we lose that feminine aspect, that other aspect that we want to be balancing. And so if we have been more focused on more growth, more healing, more expression, more individuality, how to become more, hustle more, push faster, push further, all of that intensity, we lose the intelligence of the contraction. We lose the intelligence of the rest and the integration, which makes the action more aligned, which actually brings the action into alignment. And that's what we're going to really talk about today. So, what happens when we only focus on expansion? If we're only, I don't truly believe that we can consciously be aware of one side or the other. I feel like we are consciously aware of both kind of to the same degree, where we don't have the opposing energy and we haven't developed it. I believe the level of consciousness of the other side remains restricted as well, meaning you can only go up and out as far as your roots have gone down and in. I believe one might move slightly more but then the other one has to match and meet it. Otherwise, they both remain stunted, they both remain stagnant, and they both remain inside of these looping unconscious cycles. But if we're talking about focus on expansion, if this is the main part of what we are looking at, we end up in cycles of burnout, of instability, of overreaction, of exhaustion. And then if we contract to the same shallow level of consciousness, we end up in stagnation, numbness, avoidance, and shrinking ourselves. And so alignment is about, it's not that you're necessarily doing one more than the other. It's about actually understanding the relationship between those two energies and using that energy of expansion and contraction to include more of what feels like it resonates at a deeper level for you. So you're learning the purpose of how these energies work together and how to just use that energy of expansion and contraction to start to just include more of that inner desire and dismantle the fears, dismantle the limiting beliefs that come up along the way. So let's talk about that protection mechanism, because the contraction can be and present as resistance. And that's not a bad thing. You just have to treat that resistance with the same reverence as you treat the desire for expansion. If you try and bust through resistance, You're going to overlook red flags. You're going to overlook your boundaries. You're going to disconnect from the wisdom of your body, and you're going to dissociate and disconnect from yourself and move into things that are either out of alignment or held in a way that they become out of alignment, and you can't hold them, you can't meet them, you can't work with them in a way that you are creating what you actually want out of the situation. So resistance we can kind of see as a contraction of the body. There's something here that I don't yet have the capacity to meet. There's something here that I don't yet have the capacity to discern. There's something here that I don't yet have the capacity to understand and navigate and negotiate my sense of self and my desires inside of it. So it's not about asking, necessarily why am I resisting this? This isn't a question I generally ask myself. I trust that I've reached that kind of edge and it's time to pull back and assess. And if I'm meant to move forward in that direction after integration, reflection, and, kind of realigning my energy, then I will naturally move forward in that way. But obviously, it's usually going to be with some tweaks and some changes and some conversation. Trying to bust through that resistance, you'll always have to get to the point of meeting the contraction that you have overridden. And whether that's through the presentation of illness in your body, whether it's just a full-on nervous system collapse, whether you just completely burn out, you're going to have to meet it eventually. And if you don't, that can obviously have really devastating consequences to your health and the longevity of your life. So your resistance, your contraction is trying to preserve something. It's trying to preserve energy. It's trying to preserve clarity. It's trying to preserve boundaries, discernment, your sense of self. And so let's put that into some practical examples. So inside of relationship, if intimacy, which it does at every edge of our expansion, means being seen more, being more vulnerable, being potentially more disappointed, being more connected or more dependent in some way, then resistance is naturally going to arrive. And that's not because the intimacy itself isn't something you desire, but it's the other consequences of the situation are now coming into view, coming into consciousness, and now have to be taken into consideration. So the resistance is just this edge of understanding, of awareness, that I need time to digest all of these pieces, and so I can understand how it is that I want to move forward in whatever way that is. Business examples might mean growth, or expressing ourselves or being seen also means judgment, means visibility, it means responsibility, it means expectations. And so we might genuinely desire that success and simultaneously have parts that can't fully grasp and understand what is actually needed to hold that level of success. Who do I need to be? What tools do I need to have? What support do I need to have? How do I need to operate? What's the identity, the new identity that I need to step into? All of those things. Your body, your soul, your nervous system is considering all of those things, whether you're aware of that or choose to be aware of it or not. It's just how it's happening. That's why the resistance comes up, and you can't move faster than it without it pulling you back into consideration of all of those parts at some point. Money examples might mean money means more freedom, it means more choice, it means more options, more possibility, more fun, but it's also going to represent being more vulnerable because you're going to stand out. It's maybe even going to represent guilt for having something that other people don't have, the pressure to hold yourself in a certain way, a certain level of responsibility, and understand the differing opinions and lenses of people, changing relationship dynamics, having to actually manage those finances. Everybody says that they want more, but when you have more and it then makes you stand out and it differentiates you from the identity of the person you were or the identity of the people around you, that is all the stuff that your body and mind is considering, whether you like it or not, and taking into account from your environment, the way people talk, the language they use, their relationships with money and resource, and it's taking into consideration all of those things whilst you can continue to sit in that place of saying that you want the thing and not recognizing that all of this is still going on. So those two truths or multiple truths can and do exist all simultaneously. And so the desire is real and the hesitation and the not knowing really how to fully navigate that with confidence is very real as well. And so self-aware women often get stuck here. And it's not because you're not aware of, energetics, and you haven't done inner work, and you haven't looked at fears and woundings and traumas and all of those things. But the internal dialogue becomes, and I hear this all of the time, I'm doing all of the things and I know this already, so why isn't it here? And that sentence in and of itself is the exact reason. It's like the entitlement of thinking I should have it and I deserve it now. Yet clearly I don't, because I haven't actually developed the skill set needed for it to fall into place. So I want to just have it from this place because I want to avoid slowing down, sitting with, and actually coming into alignment with the deeper parts that are actually required. So we have to catch ourselves in that language. We have to be able to sit with the process of, if it's not here, I'm not aligned with it yet. It's just how it is. I haven't figured out the things that I need to figure out in order to have it. And there's way more available to me than what I'm allowing myself the option of even considering. I'm thinking, this is it. I've reached my ceiling. It should all be here. When the reality is there's more work to do, but it also gets to be way better than what you expect or think you can call in from the place of where you are now. So awareness itself isn't going to override or remove these opposing forces that you have within yourself. And the stronger those opposing forces are, the less capacity we generally have. And what I mean by that is opposing forces, kind of like fight and flight, or just that desire to move towards and simultaneously the desire to move away, to expand and contract, and having that experience and them feeling like they're opposing should be and does happen when we're at the edge of our capacity. So if that is a reality that you're living in a lot of the time, where you feel quite fractured as a embodied experience, it's very important that we're not glorifying that as being, not glorifying the emotional dysregulation as just kind of being extra spiritual, being extra all over the place, or just feeling really deeply, or any of that kind of stuff. Because what we're actually trying to do is recognize that those big polar opposites that we're seeing so vividly now in the collective, those polar opposite forces happen when we're at the edge of our capacity and the way we then navigate those opposing forces that are in conflict, how well we can hold those things in order to develop a new way, develop a way forward, is indicative of our emotional maturity and the capacity of our nervous system to navigate those opposing forces. So if we're always in opposing forces and we feel like that we're all of the time, our job is to be aware of those and find the thing that emerges when we hold those two opposites. And that third way is that stability. It's the foundation. It's the merging of masculine and feminine, the merging of yin and yang, the merging of the relationship of your nervous system between action and rest, the relationship of the breath. So finding that middle ground is the foundation of security and the foundation of creation, what actually brings us into alignment. So the more fractured we are, the more at odds we are, the more we're going to see things show up in our physical reality that feel contradictory or conflicting to what we say we are wanting. So that means that healing and awareness are never going to eliminate the complexity of that relationship, but they are going to make it more easeful to understand when we're at the edge of our capacity, how we need to navigate it, and how confidently we can move through and understand that we just have to keep meeting those challenges in order to be in alignment at that next frequency and attract more of what it is that we say that we want. So we don't become just like, totally fully aligned and congruent to an ultimate state unless we are like a fully enlightened being. And even then, that's usually only going to happen, generally speaking, towards the end of our lifetime, because otherwise we've reached enlightenment and there's nothing more for our soul to do. Otherwise, we are practicing the relationship between these energies at all times. So sometimes what can happen inside of healing is you're actually going to start to recognize and increase your awareness of this tension. You're first going to be aware of it. You're going to be aware of the tension within yourself, the tension outside of yourself, the tension in the world, these polarities, all of this stuff. And you're going to have to then start to work with it. So rather than being dissociated from it or numb, you're starting to actually then work with it. So sometimes it becomes more obvious and therefore sometimes more challenging to start to work with it. So here comes the problem of trying to choose one side or the other. And the more inner conflict we are within ourselves, the more fractured we are within ourselves in this way, the more conflict we're going to find that we have in our life and our relationships. So if you flip-flop between being really identified with expansion, with growth, with pushing, with becoming, with expressing, and then you never feel settled, you have an inability to rest, you find that you're inside of this dissatisfaction, and you say, I'm doing all of the right things, so why haven't I created what it is that I say that I want? You have to look at the balancing energy and the thing that you're avoiding by balancing that out. Simultaneously, we can also be in a season of glorifying the opposite. Safety, certainty, predictability, more control, more rest, more contraction, more shrinking. And all of these are okay. But if we're not understanding the relationship between the two, then you're going to flip-flop between the two. And once you regain your energy, you're just going to go out there and burn yourself out again. So the bigger conversation it's not about choosing a side. It's not between flip-flopping between the two. It's actually increasing your capacity to hold the opposite energies with neutrality. And that's what alignment is. So true alignment isn't about it's not about not meeting resistance at those edges of expansion. It's not about not having fear at those edges of expansion. It's not about feeling disconnected sometimes from your purpose or the way forward, or not being sure, or feeling like you're in the unknown when you are resting and contracting and conserving energy. It's not about not having those conflicting feelings when you are being tested to grow. But alignment is being able to continually move forward whilst holding potential conflicting truths within yourself. The most emotionally mature people are the ones that are continually showing up despite there potentially being an inner conflict, and finding a way to move with integrity, move with grace, move with composure, and develop the clarity that comes from those two energies then merging and moving more harmoniously together. So you can absolutely desire intimacy and say, I also feel vulnerable or exposed or resistant to it. I want visibility and I'm scared of the judgment. I want expansion and more expression. And I want stability and I want change. And I also will grieve the loss of what I'm leaving behind. That is a mature embodiment. That is a mature and grounded, emotionally present way of moving through the world and understanding yourself. You can hold the fact that you are complex in that way, that there's always some form of like polarity happening at a growth edge, and still find this new way to hold those two pieces and make ground and move towards more of what you want, then that's the sweet spot. It's going to take you time. There's just no way around that. But if you are continually doing that, you're on a very, very good path. So some closing reflections that may be really useful around this topic are, what part of me wants expansion, and what does she want right now? Like, what are those things? What does expansion and having more of that energy of expansion give me? And then what part of me wants contraction? And then what does that look like? What does that give me? What does the stability and the energy conservation give me? What part of me is trying to protect? And what part of me is trying to express and create? And then how do those feel in my body? How do those show up? And how do I currently work with understanding that those two things coexist at the same time? You can also ask yourself, where have I been making one element of that wrong in some situation? And where can I bring more acceptance to those desires within myself at any one time or around any situation or issue you may be facing? And then the ultimate question is what would change if I were allowing both of those realities, and both the expansion and the contraction, to have their place and time and both be nourished in whatever season and in the divine timing that they need to be nourished? What would change in my life? And I always like to use the analogy of a flower blooming. And as it, if you watch the time lapse of a flower, it's going to go through expansion and contraction, expansion and contraction. Right. And you want to think of yourself like this. So sometimes you are going to be in expansion. There's still going to be these micro contractions that sometimes it's going to feel more like expansion. Other times it's going to feel more like contraction. But how can you just bring greater awareness to the way those energies are moving through you? Bring greater awareness to where you feel like those are fractured and you feel like there's a split or they're working against each other. And then how can you bring more acceptance for both parts in your life and how they present and what they want? And work actively every day to do something that makes sure both of those energies and the way they work together are being nourished. And if you do that enough, this is how you're going to bring yourself into much greater alignment with what you say that you want, recognizing that it's always going to hold some level of risk or threat when you get to that edge of having more of that true expression and that true desire. All right, can't wait to see you guys next week.